Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of The Context. I'm Shannon Williams, co-founder at Obot AI, and joined by my co-host, as per usual, Darren Shepard, also co-founder here at Obot. We've got a great show today. Liad Yosef is here again from Aura AI. He's been on a couple times over the years to talk about MCP UI and MCP apps, and we're going to have a great conversation today about sort of how the agentic web is developing. So very excited for today's conversation. Lots of updates. I spent the last week in India, which was fantastic. We had two big conferences in Mumbai and Bangalore with over 1,600, almost 2,000 people at the two events. There are a lot of MCP cons and agent cons coming up over the next literally 4 months, I think maybe 5 months. If you haven't already and you are joining us from China or Japan or Korea, we are going to be in Asia in August and September, and in the lead up to our next big Agent Con, MCP Con in Amsterdam in September. So sessions are already, I think submissions are now closed for the next 4 events. I've just got started looking and reviewing papers. Angie and I were just talking about how many submissions there are. So especially for Amsterdam and Tokyo. So we've got a lot of submissions to go through. I think there's still a few days if you want to submit for Toronto or San Jose. Those are, San Jose might be closing. I know we were going to close it a little bit early. So keep an eye on that. It's definitely moving along. The sessions in India were really amazing. We had 2 full days in 2 different cities, about 3 days between them. And the talks were fantastic. So many organizations talking about their consumption of MCPs, their consumption of agents, how they're building out their security stack, how they're building out their management stack, the best practices for agent development. We had talks about sandboxes. We had talks about MCP UI. We had talks there about sort of cloud and sort of how to use MCPs to manage cloud. There was just talk after talks. We had talks on Goose. There was a lot of talks about Agent Gateway, the latest project from the AIF. So we had lots and lots of things going on. It was very exciting. And it was if you want to watch any of the recordings, you can find them all on our YouTube channel. But definitely a great couple events. It was awesome to go to India. I hadn't been to India in like 5-6 years, and despite an enormous pain getting a visa, when I finally got a visa and got there, it was fantastic as always. I think we had 250 people in a workshop, both cities. Just super excited to really build their skills around how to take on this new agentic stack. So very cool, very awesome. The context has been cooking along. We've been running lots of great sessions recently, a couple of weeks off as I've been traveling, but we had Supabase on, Walmart on, Aviatrix on a few months ago. So lots of great talks that we've had, lots of great talks coming up. We're going to have the team from Agent Gateway, the latest project, on in a couple of weeks. And it should be a really great month of talks. All right. Today's talk, we are joined once again by Liad. Liad is joining us from Israel. He's calling in from Tel Aviv, I believe. He's literally on the road every time I talk to him. I've seen him more in San Francisco, I think, than he would like. I'm sure than his family would like. And he's basically been at conferences nonstop, whether it's Google or all the different AI conferences he's been speaking on. But in the meantime, despite building MCP apps and MCP UI, he actually took the time to start a company. Liad is now the co-founder of Aura AI. If you haven't seen it yet, Aura.ai is an incredible site. It allows you to analyze your site's readiness for agentic use cases. And they're doing a ton around this real question of what the next web looks like. So Liad, fantastic to have you here. Really excited. I know you had a couple slides you wanted to share. Do you want to put those up and I'll pop them in?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me here again. It's always a pleasure. I think many know me from the work around MCP apps, which is a really good segue to this agentic web. So I'll just share my screen here, and we'll talk a little bit about this new future of the agentic web. You can see my screen, all right?
Yeah, it looks great.
Awesome. So I mean, I built this talk yesterday, so it might be outdated. I have a few hats. So I'm also I'm the co-creator of MCP apps, but as you mentioned, I also founded a company called Aura for human agentic interactions or for agentic readiness. And the idea is that MCP apps really pave the way to the agentic web, right? So just a quick primer on MCP apps. It allows bringing rich interfaces inside chats. You probably saw it in ChatGPT apps, in Claude apps. Basically, every big host now supports the spec of MCP apps. And I co-lead it alongside Ido Salomon in the MCP in the global MCP committee. The idea behind MCP apps is that it allows brands and businesses to actually ship part of their brand and identity to the chat, and this is like a win-win-win, right? Because the brands, they instead of just sending the data, for example, I don't know, Shopify or Airbnb, instead of just sending their text, their data, they're sending chunks of their identity, as you can see. The users gain trust and familiarity, right? Because we know how to interact with the Airbnb's UI, and we know how to trust Booking.com UI. And for the chat, for the hosts, it's actually also a win because they are being connected to this world of connectors and domain experts without them needing to reinvent how to book a seat in a venue, because Ticketmaster knows to do it best, right? And remember that, because that's the key point that we're going to come back to. We really solved this like last mile of interaction with MCP apps, and that really ushered the agentic web. Because up until now, if we wanted to do something, we have to do it manually, right? If you wanted to, organize an event, we had to stare at different tabs with different interfaces, and we had to study or teach ourselves all of these new UIs just to convey our intent to these brands, right? But the idea behind MCP apps is that these UIs can be broken into atoms and actually be composed by our chat, by our assistant. So instead of just staring at tabs in the browser, we'll have this experience, right? If I just want to organize an anniversary, I can have my assistant pull all the data, all the apps from me. And that really changes the way that we think about how to interact with the web. Because this is definitely not the future, right? Trying to browse to different tabs just to interact with different text boxes of what you want to do today. This is definitely not the future. And also browser agents are not the future, because they rely on websites, on human websites, as a source of truth, which is not very efficient for agents, because agents don't need to paginate and filter and sort and use all the interfaces that we spent 2 decades perfecting for human limitations. So browser agents are not the final step. And also even WebMCP or everything that uses the website as a source of truth. And the bold vision is that websites and browsers are going to give way to personal assistants as the entry point for the web. And we can see it even today. Even today, especially for the younger generation, people don't, young adults, young teens, they don't go to Chrome or to the browser. They go to ChatGPT to ask things or to look for things. Even non-technical people that are used to work with ChatGPT, I don't know, my mother uses ChatGPT for everything. If she could book a doctor appointment using ChatGPT, she won't go to that clinic's website. My friends that are connecting Jira's MCP to their IDE, they're not visiting Jira.com anymore, right? And just think that there are hundreds and thousands and hundreds of thousands of developers just trying to perfect these UIs that people less and less see, like human less and less see. So this is a shift that we're seeing even today. And we see Salesforce just recently went headless as well, just allowing agents to headlessly interact with it, right? And we can see this is from the last days. So Cloudflare just published that we have more agentic traffic than human, and something that Matthew Prince said that it's going to happen only at the end of 2027, but it's happening right now. And David Kramer from Sentry just published today, actually, about how Sentry is going to be designed mainly for agents, mainly for the usage of agents, and less for the usage of humans. And it makes sense, right? If you think about the way that we interact with services. This last mile is on a spectrum, because if we're using OpenClaw or some sort of like an autonomous agent, then we don't need UI, right? We just launch it and it does something and that's it. But it's on the spectrum because sometimes we do need this UI from the brand. So we're looking at it like as a nearly headless web. We're not going to go completely headless, but yeah, this is from Harry Potter. We're not going to go completely headless, but most of our interactions are going to happen in a headless way, only for the last mile that we really need human approval or something that it's very complex. We'll have these small chunks of UI being sent. And that changes the way that brands and websites and companies think about their customers, right? Think about their users. And we already know, for example, that new agents, like new autonomous agents, like Hermes, for example, if it needs to interact with someone, with a service, and it can't interact fully headlessly with it, and it needs to spin up a browser, just to click a button, it actually remembers that as a friction point, and it's less likely to interact with that service going forward. So agents really need the web to be agent-friendly. And instead of thinking about like user experience, we need to think about agentic experience. This is not new, but also the user agentic experience, right? Because eventually you'll have a human eye at the end of the chain. And here it's a mess because we have a lot of protocols, we have a lot of best practices. No one really knows what agent-ready really means. Every agent defines agent-ready differently. Even Sam Altman said that we should allow the web to be usable by humans in Asia, but what does it really mean? And as assistants are being this entry point to the web, we really need to shift our focus to think about agent readiness. This is, by the way, this is as an example from Tavili.com. It's an agentic search company. This spike that you see in getting API keys, this is OpenClaw. So OpenClaw alone caused this spike of nearly 3x in Tavili usages because OpenClaw uses Tavili autonomously, right? So right now, a website needs to be agent-ready everywhere. So we need to think that we're going to have human visitors. We're going to have human visitors with their own agents. We're going to have browser agents that will interact with the website. We're going to have our own app agent, right, that humans interact with. And we need to be this agent-ready. And it's as an anecdote, when we built analytics for Aura.ai, we asked Cloud Code what's the best analytics service, and it recommended PostHog. And we said, no, we prefer Mixpanel because we know Mixpanel for 10 years and we know how to work with it and we like it. And Cloud Code insisted on PostHog. It said that it has better MCP and API integration, so it can work better with it. And I mean, we don't have brand loyalty, so we eventually went with PostHog. But that made me think about Mixpanel. I mean, Mixpanel spent a decade perfecting their developer experience and UX for humans. I know Mixpanel, I like Mixpanel, and I went with PostHog just because Claude preferred it, because it's more agent-friendly. It's going to happen 10 out of 10 times. Claude is not going to change its mind, right? That just shows how important it is to be agent-friendly. We know, for example, that Vercel and Supabase, because they're recommended by Cloud Code, their usage went like this, right? Because most of the developers just say, okay, use whatever you want. So in Aura, we built, and I'll show it in a second, but we'll build like these agent readiness benchmarks of trying to understand what it means to be agent ready. We went through a protocol. I mean, I'm in the MCP committee, and I have some access to other standards as well, so I can try to aggregate the best practices and best standards for what agents really need. My co-founder, Asaf Alavik, is also in agentic search. So we try to build this benchmark, and actually it gives really pretty good visibility to how well a website is friendly or designed for agents. But something interesting happened because we tried to ask around. I asked a friend of mine in OpenAI and Anthropic, what does it mean to be agent ready? Like what are the best practices that they publish for their tools, for their connectors? And all of them said the same thing. They said, we stopped publishing these best practices because every time we publish best practices, the models become better and these practices become obsolete. Like 6 months ago, it was common knowledge that an MCP tool description should be 3 paragraphs and it should be very descriptive for an agent to know how to work with it. And now even 3 lines are enough because Opus 4.8, definitely Fable, they know how to reason and how to walk their way around it. So it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to define the benchmarks, right? we try to build it in like this 5 layers of what it means to be agent friendly. We try to define it because we know AEO, GEO, we have a lot of companies doing that for discovery, but discovery is just the first phase, right? An agent still need to know who you, like, what do you do, who you are, how to authenticate to you headlessly, how to pay you headlessly, how to work with you, and eventually how to close the loop for the user experience. And then we said, okay, so agents should define agent readiness, right? Here we can see an agentic feedback that an agent returned to us about Cloudflare in that example of how well it could work with Cloudflare. Because if you think about Lighthouse, for example, that's Google's tool for assessing websites' human readiness or human performance. They actually measured human performance to say, okay, if your website takes more than 2 seconds to load, then 30% of the humans will bounce away. But we can't do the same for it. We have to measure agents. We can't decide it right for agents. And we also build this cool tool that shows you the journey of an agent through the website. And we use all of these, everything is free, obviously. We use all of these to gather insights and do some research about the readiness of the ecosystem. We try to, we'll talk about it in a second, we try to consolidate all of these questions of, should my website be agent ready, like with WebMCP for browser agents, or should I go completely headless like Salesforce and Cloudflare? What about different protocols? We'll talk about all this in a second. Yeah. So maybe I'll show Aura for a second, then we can talk about it.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so this is Aura. Basically, you can put any domain here, and it will just run a scan on how well it's fit for agents. And like I said, we run scans on 5 layers, and we run like hundreds of scans, benchmarks, protocols, like best practices. Obviously, with MCP and MCP apps, like everything. Like you see, we run even auth.md, even though it's still emerging. But we run all of this, and we spawn agents in the background to actually hit this website and return some insights. And you can, if you want, you can go to aura.ai and browse it. And as you can see here, you can see even the agentic feedback. And we use that. We also give you like actionable insight, like how to improve things, and eventually you can fix with AI. So you can just have a prompt just to put it in your coding agent, and it will be fixed. And it's interesting because a lot of the companies that ran Aura on their websites, for example, Etio, they ranked 58, and then they did like this blitz for a week to up their ranking, because we actually curate the tests and the benchmarks that we check, and we know let's say something interesting here is that with Telnix, for example, they have an MCP server. Let's see it here. So they have the product MCP server, which is unauthenticated. It's gated, right? Which is okay because it should be gated. And they have the doc MCP server, which shouldn't be gated. And we check for that as well, because it doesn't make a lot of sense if you have a documentation MCP server that is behind auth. So we check for all of these things that we learn. And since we have a lot of websites, like a lot of companies already scanned, we can have some really interesting statistics on that. For example, we can see here the adoption of protocols across the industry. We can see that almost 50% of the companies publish LLMs.txt files, which is let's remember that, right? It's becoming like the de facto standard, right, for an agentic entry point. But do agents really look for that? We'll see in a second. And we can see the emerging standards for like WebMCP, A2A. This is really interesting. And we can also see companies like how agent-ready companies are, which is really interesting. So this is This is a website or a tool that we use mainly for research, and again, it's free. You can just run your website through it. And the actual interesting part is the agent journey. So you can go through Aura 2 agent journey, and you can put here just like any domain you want. I'm just putting telnix.com because we just showed telnix. You can choose a harness, and you can choose like which intent you want to run this like to run this domain against. And we actually spawn a real agent in the background with this harness to run against this domain with this intent. And you can see here the actual journey that the agent makes, right? So it hits the home here, it goes to agent sign up because it probably found this link here. It hits 404 here, and you can see exactly what it's doing, which is that's in live in real time. And eventually when it stops, we also give you like actionable insights. For example, here it stopped. It reached what it wanted. So you can see that 100% of what it looked for was in the website. It didn't have to rely on anything like on pre-existing knowledge. 86% reliability, and you can see here exactly what happened and how to fix it or how to improve it. And it's really interesting to see different harnesses trying the same prompt on domains. And again, this is something that every tool or every website can use just to visualize what it really means for an agent to try to interact with. And again, you can play with it for hours because it's interesting to see how ChatGPT uses it differently than Claude, and how OpenClaw uses it differently. We also count here the tokens because we know that the new agents they start to be token sensitive. So we try to do that. And actually, we took that and we productized it into what we call Aura Studio, which is again it's free. Here you can see like a prompt. You can see the path that we just shown. We can like replay here, so you can see exactly like what's happening with much more detailed experience. And you can see here the stats, like how much time it took. And the interesting part is when we try to run like multiple harnesses, then you can see here like every harness, the flow that it takes with the same intent over your domain. So this is again something very very cool to try and to play with. This is against Aura.ai, but you can obviously do it against every domain you want. And we also have here the readiness report that I showed you. So we really try to figure out how we can solve this agent front kind of thing, agent readiness kind of thing. You have pricing.md, for example, but we saw that agents don't look for pricing.md. Note that here there was no LLMs.txt, right? The agent went straight to the docs. Here it hit 404, but it went straight to the docs. And actually, we saw that most of the agents don't look for LLMs.txt. So what does it mean? Do we need to publish LLMs.txt? And again, yeah.
Are you doing this when you're driving the agent? Are you giving it a browser, or like what's the tool?
No, so that's a really good question. We're not giving an agent a browser. It's just pointing it to the domain with an intent, with a prompt. Here it's more clear, and that's it. That's it. It's and I have to mention this is like real world wild agents. We don't give it any system prompts. We don't guide it to anything. We don't say use the docs or use the LLM60 because it's really interesting to see what the agents do. So we don't give it a browser. And actually, the next step will be to give it a browser and to see where it hits a friction point where it has to spin up a browser. But all of this, everything you see here is headless.
How do you know the branching then? That's why I was just thinking just technically, because like if you do a browser, you have like a referrer, but like how do you know? Like
because we have the trace of the agent, so we can connect why it did certain steps, right? We can connect why. I mean, if it got a link from somewhere, we know that it got it because of that step. so we can do these connections, right? And we know if for some links or some paths it brought it from its own training, then it's also in the trace. So we know that. You can just run like different harnesses on different models and just see the difference, which is really, really interesting. I'll maybe stop share. And I'll just say that for the question of a browser, so there's you probably heard of WebMCP. That's something that Google is really pushing hard right now, and it's like an API, like a standard API for browser agents to interact with your website, which is, I think it's a super important step right now, because right now the main source of truth are still the websites, and it's really built for co-browsing, right? So if you browse on Chrome and you have Gemini on Chrome, you'd want Gemini to actually interact with the website for you if you want to write something and it does it. Eventually, a lot of these actions will go to the headless path. Like as personal assistants will become more autonomous and more proactive, the usage of these tools, especially for productivity, will become more headless. So it's important to understand like where it will be in 6 months or in 12 months from now, right? This is where we try to aim, because you'd probably want your assistant to put in the morning to say, these are the 3 things you need to do today because I interacted with all of these services headlessly for you, like and authenticated on your behalf, and this is what I manage, and I didn't need a browser for that. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really fascinating, like the approach of basically, because I always get frustrated with engineers, let's say like WebMCP or something like that, where it's kind of like the idea of like what it should be versus like what it actually is. It's kind of observing the agent. It's like, well, what does the agent actually do? Because there's like a weird thing with AI is kind of like the simplest and most logical approach kind of is what AI is going to go towards. But then if you continue that pattern enough, even if it's slightly illogical, if you continue it enough, the models get trained on that pattern, and then so it's kind of like self-reinforcing. Because I see that with skills, whereas like skills was a little bit odd, but then the models got trained on it, and now it becomes, oh well, that's the way to do it. So it's kind of weird of like so it's kind of like the models are almost determining their own path, as you're saying, because it's like I like the ideas of like it's like, oh, have the say like accept encoding markdown. It's like, oh, just get a markdown version. Like that kind of makes sense. But it's like, does the agent really need it?
Exactly.
It adapts really easily, and it runs these little Python snippets to grab whatever it needs to, and it's really fascinating where it's like. Just observing it is almost better than just adapting to like, oh, this is what actually works. Optimizing, like it's more optimizing as opposed to
guessing.
Yeah, guessing.
Yeah, we said we had this markdown header because we said obviously agents will use markdown better than HTML. But like I said, then the models become better and they can use HTML almost as efficient as markdown. So. Do we need it? And so I think we're there. So I think we're in the observation phase where we observe agents. But WebMCP was created because browser agents used to use screenshots and the DOM to interact with websites. And then WebMCP said, okay, let's make it easier for them and let's create these tools that they can interact with. But if you go one step further, they say, okay, so why do they need the website at all? And I had some interesting discussions with people that work on accessibility in the Linux Foundation. And agents, like browser agents, are like optimizing for agents is very similar to optimizing for people with limitations, like site limitations, right? So if your website is accessible, then it's accessible for agents. And then comes the question, so what's the role of the UI there? Like, what's the role of the actual human UI if this is what we're aiming for? So it's really interesting field right now.
Yeah, because when you go back to like accessibility or semantic markup and stuff like that, it's like, oh, it's actually a lot better. I mean, I'm always fascinated with kind of like the solutions in this space always end up being really, really simple. It's like if you end up kind of pushing towards like this really fancy thing, it's like, no, it just ends up being like some very basic, simple thing. And like I thought it was interesting is like with WebMCP and whatnot. So if you look at kind of what's state of the art for driving the browsers right now, it's like, oh, just give them access to the CDP socket. Like they already know it. Like we didn't have to really invent a new protocol. It's like, oh, they're really good at just talking CDP. And so it's like, oh, well, then it just gets access. It already knows everything about it. So it's fascinating. I feel like you've kind of invented like I'm a little torn by this. You've like kind of invented SEO for agents, which is like, it's like, oh great, like you're the new snake oil salesman. But it's like, it's really like, it's amazing to see that like, because I just keep kind of coming in this, this thing with agents where it's like, oh, AI is going to replace everything. And I'm like, no, I don't necessarily think AI is going to replace all the existing layers we have today. Like we have all these kind of like, we have SaaSes, we have cloud, we have all we have all these things that kind of serve a purpose or whatever. And it's like, does AI really need to replace all those things? And it's like, well, no, they're serving their purpose, but maybe it's not the most efficient. Like, it's a little harder. Like there's more efficient ways that as humans we could consume these things. So it's like AI is kind of sitting, I think it's going to take off immensely on this kind of the consuming and using the technology we already have today. So this idea of like, if I'm building a SaaS today, I don't really think like, because there's been all these things like, oh, SaaS is dead. And it's like, no, I don't really think SaaS is dead, because SaaS is fundamentally kind of like really about, kind of like aggregating data, providing some access to that data in an insightful way. And I don't think insight becomes commoditized, unless it really is, but like hopefully humans, we continue to be insightful. So it's like, I think these centralized services continue to make sense, but it's not necessarily like the human that's always going to interact with it. The human, like an agent will interact with it too. So this becomes like a different channel. And I don't even think 100% like chat takes over, because for certain realms like productivity, for example, is like, no, productivity still needs kind of like you need a more rich UI. Like you see that with coding where it's like, yeah, chat is one part, but you still have an editor because you still want to visualize things in a certain way. So there's still different things. So, but agents consuming, where it's like you're seeing there's like this seems very, very logical that like every company, just as like, they're like internet, then mobile, it's like now they're looking at like, okay, what is my agentic experience?
Agent front, yeah, like this, like I had a mobile app, like you said, that's a mobile front. So what's the agent front? And actually, I agree with what you say. We see it already in developer tools. It's very clear that developer tools start to cater more and more to agents because coding agents are more prominent. We see it now becoming a little bit more to productivity tools like OCR, like Salesforce, and all the things that can really benefit from being connected to my agent, to my third-party agent. And I think for consumers, even though consumers started the adoption with ChatGPT, it will take a little bit of time for consumer products to actually be headless or nearly headless.
Curious, you've been looking at these numbers, Liad. What's the agent readiness of services like airlines and services like they're pretty low, I would imagine. I expect to find everything close to like good agentic booking services and hotel.
They're pretty low, and also their business model is not suited for consumption by agents, as opposed to developer tools, which they can adapt. So I think there are a lot of things that need to change before these consumer services will be fully agentic ready, like from the business side of things. What do you do if you don't have human eyeballs and you can't upsell anything? I do think that the future, we discussed it a little bit, that the future is that we'll have agents in their side, in the brand side, that will speak to my agent. So it's not my agent will just blindly interact with it, but I'll have like these specialized agents. It's a conversation that we had. But it's clear that we need this sort of like new front for agents to interact, right? So it's like it's like an anecdote, yeah. But I was traveling in Georgia, the country, a few months ago, and I was in one remote village, and there was this older lady, local, that asked me to take a picture of her. So I took her phone to take a picture, and she had 3 apps on her home screen. She had camera, WhatsApp, and ChatGPT. That's it. No browser, no Chrome, nothing. So it's such a natural entry point to the web that I'll be very surprised if it's not gonna take over some of the browsers traffic.
I can tell you, trying to get an Indian visa 2 weeks ago, I would have killed for an MCP or like if they could have just exposed something closer to an API to deal with the complexity of their website, because honestly, it's a bad website combined with, you know, a rough process combined with a ton of typing and you think, oh my gosh, when is this gonna, you know, and it'll probably be the last thing. The last people to adopt this are going to be the people who wish.
I think it's interesting with businesses because there's like this big fear. It's like, it's like, remember very early where it's like some company put a chatbot on their webpage and then got, sued because it, violated some policy or whatever. Some, I think it was an airline in Canada or something like that. But like, is if you look at the way for businesses on how to look at this is you look at like, well, treat the agent and the AI as the consumer. It shifts down to the client. You can treat it kind of like client-side JavaScript or something where it's like you inherently don't trust it. So when you look at like, it's like, oh, well, I can program 4 agents because my security profile and those things or whatever, they don't fundamentally change. It's kind of like, so it's not like, oh no, what is AI going to do? Because if you look at the perspective of it's the consumer who has an agent who's running AI, right? So it's like, because I think that's just like, to me, when I think about a business, let's say like one of these very traditional, airplane, like airlines or something like that, it's a very scary proposition of like, what does this mean? I mean, beyond just all the business implications, but just like, what does it look like from a security stuff? But I see that more and more where there's like, because there's so much concern with these customer service chatbots of like doing the wrong thing. But I think it's interesting because the idea of the customer service chatbot is they take all the responsibility for it. It's like, they're like, oh, I'm saying this, but it's like, no. But if you look at, like, if you say like ChatGPT, for example, is like, well, ChatGPT is the agent and they kind of take the responsibility to a certain degree. Like, so it's like, because I think that's one of the real key things I'm seeing with AI is kind of who is responsible. And it's like, as long as the responsibility still kind of relies with the human, then you're kind of fine. It's like when Maps came out. Remember, like Google Maps first came out, it was always like, or it was Yahoo Maps or whatever. It was always like, here's your directions, but they're probably wrong. You have to check them yourself. Right? And that's where we started with AI too. It's like, well, here's your answer from ChatGPT, but it's probably wrong. Right. And then over time it gets better and you trust it a little more. But it's like at no time did the company ever say, oh, it's 100% correct. Right. And somehow you need to be able to kind of approach it from that way.
I always like the analogy of a human personal assistant, like a human executive assistant. If you'd have one and you'll ask them to do something and they did it wrong, you wouldn't blame the website. You'd say, yeah, okay, you should do it better. I mean, I take responsibility. You take responsibility. So it's very similar. It's very similar.
Very different, though. Come on, man. We're not going to do that when you're buying $5,000 airplane tickets, and it's like, oh, I booked it for the wrong year. It looks right. I see it. I go to get on the plane, and the ticket was booked for 2027. That's the kind of thing that's going to happen, and somebody's going to be liable for the. And of course, the company's going to say, no, your responsibility to double check this thing.
No, but that's the difference is like, because there's like, what's really the fundamental difference? Because there's this idea of like agents are going to perform actions without your consent or whatever. So on a website, it's the same thing. If you screwed up a website and it's like they booked it and then they got like the website said $100 and you got booked for $5,000, then it's like, yeah, the business screwed up. So that from the agentic experience, there's a very important thing of human in the loop confirmations. Like you cannot get away from that. So because that's the easiest thing. It's like, that's what I'm saying is like you shift the responsibility back to the consumer, right? And that's the same thing you do with everything. And like, I know we abuse it at this point with like terms of services and whatnot. It's like, oh no, you agreed to that. But companies need to, because that's the only way a consumer is going to feel comfortable anyways. It's like, because you don't want to be like, oh crap, what is this thing going to do? Like, you have to have this comfort level of like, no, I can do this, because before it does something bad, you're going to have to agree to it. And so that human in the loop confirmation is like extremely important. But
I want to change direction just for a minute, because we're going to run out of time. But so you've had Aura up now for about 6 weeks, 10 weeks, a couple months?
6 weeks, something like that.
Yeah. What kind of conversations are you having with companies now that they're seeing their? I'm just curious what the last 6 weeks have been like for you guys. We've been hearing about it. You showed me it a couple months ago, and I was super excited. What's the conversations like? What are people telling you?
Yeah, so actually, it's funny because MCP apps actually like paved the way to that, right? So the MCP app experiences actually brought companies to think, wait a second, how do agents really use me? So when we released Aura, immediately we got a lot of inbound from companies that are saying, help us be agent ready. They said we didn't even know that we were not implementing it right. We had an MCP, so we didn't know that it's not working. We had an MCP app, we didn't know. And I think it was really interesting to speak with those companies and understand what's important to each one. For example, 11 Labs says, I want agents to be able to pay me headlessly, because they need to pay me and get an API token back. And Salesforce say, I want agents to be able to authenticate to me headlessly. So every we actually had companies that said, I want agents to be able to interact with my website. I'm not going to publish an API. I have a website. No, small companies, these moms and dads shops. So it was really interesting to see that no one really knows what agent really means, and everybody differs in the way of thinking. I can say that we're having some really big partnerships right now with big infra companies that host hundreds of millions of websites, to be the agentic front for them, because it's a little bit like cyber products. Everybody wants it. Nobody wants the headache of keeping track of what's pricing MD, what's AuthMD, do I need to do X402, MPP? Nobody wants this headache. Everybody wants the visibility, but they want you to take away this agent front. So I think it's by the way, I think it's an amazing domain for startups to come in. Anyway, this is where it is right now, and it's moving faster than I thought. So I thought I'm going to have 6 months of trying to educate companies that it's coming, and we get inbound from companies that are saying, we set up, a lot of companies set up agentic readiness teams. We set up an agentic readiness team. They have no idea what to do. So let's try to work together. So anyway, I think there's an amazing opportunity right now in the field. This is my personal obsession in the past 2 years of doing this vision of doing this shift from browsers to personal assistants. So.
Well, I think it's fascinating because MCP apps was a very, I think, kind of like a technology first, pushing like how do we get tech. But I really like this approach of what you're doing, which is it's basically just observe and adapt. Because like when I first went to Aura AI, and maybe this has changed because I saw it maybe a week or so ago, and I'm sure everything's changed at this point. It was like I clicked and it's like lists all these standards. So then in my mind, I'm like, oh, so does that mean I need to go and implement all those standards? But I like this thing much better where it's like, no, just observe. Like, what is it doing? Like, so it's just this constant feedback cycle, because these models are just, they're changing so rapidly. And kind of like what I was saying before is like, sometimes they tend to do what's logical, but what is illogical, if it becomes popular enough and the models kind of, like if all the labs kind of agree this is the best way, they just kind of steer it that way. And then suddenly that becomes a thing. And it was like, well, that was dumb, but whatever, that's what it is, So it's just observe and adapt. And like, that is like kind of like almost the best story you can kind of give to companies.
I'll just say that the benefit of like this layer is because you have a lot of protocols and best practices, and you don't know, maybe Auth0 and WorkOS implement headless auth differently, and you have MPP and X402, right? But you also have a variety of harnesses and agents that come to you. So OpenClaw can use different tools than Claude Code, and both of them needs to use your service. So like having this adaptive layer in the middle, which is a little bit, it reminds a little bit of the early browser days where and you didn't know how it's gonna work on different browser, but like multiply it by 100. So anyway, it's a very interesting research field and very interesting field to build in.
Yeah, like I think it's fascinating because it's like you're saying in the early days. Because I'll tell people, I'm like, oh, build your own harness, build your own coding agent. Like, it's a worthwhile endeavor right now. Learn, explore, whatever. But it's obvious over time. It's like, yeah, it's probably going to consolidate down to like one or two. Like, it's just like we like things will consolidate down to the point where it's like, yeah, just use the one. But like right now, it's just the Wild West, and it's like it's impossible to predict anything. And anybody who's trying to predict something is like, at this point, is like, well, you're just kind of dumb. Like, just stop trying to predict. It's impossible. Yeah. So it's just like, just watch what's happening. Nobody could ever like OpenClaw, like something like that. You can't predict something like that. Where it's just like, why at that time did that technology, like, why did that suddenly take off? And there's things like that where it's like, I think there's gonna be some similar catalyst moment for consumer agentic stuff where it suddenly become very important to businesses of like, oh crap, I need to jump on this bandwagon because now we are seeing this major shift of consumers coming through agentic workflows. And, that's an important channel. If I don't capitalize on that, then, I'm losing money. Because I think that's a struggle right now with businesses. You have the smart ones who are kind of looking ahead, but like realistically, it's like what percentage of revenue is coming in through agentic workflows? It's probably extremely low at the moment, but
at the moment, yeah. This is why we're trying to work with business goals. We're trying to say, what's your business goal? And do agents really get there? But you're right. It's like I think when Gretzky saying that you have to aim to where the puck is going to be and not where it is right now. Yeah. So you have to build it in order to be there.
Guys, we should wrap up. This was great, Liad, as always. Really love chatting with you about where this all is going, and I love how you're always thinking about the consumer because I think a lot of people don't spend that time. Darren, thank you as always for a great conversation. Liad, hopefully we'll have you back again in a few months and hear how it's going. Are you going to be in Amsterdam for the MCP Dev Summit in September?
Probably. I haven't missed one, even one. I missed the one in India, but
Great to catch up. Looking forward to keeping an eye on, or it sounds like it is going.
Thank you very much.
Would have expected. Take care, guys. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.